The qualification session is at Mont Tremblant GT, no chicane, in Quebec, Canada. Jason Short from New Zealand in turn 1 is first. Johnny Prince from New Zealand in turn 6 is third. Jason Short in turn 10 is P1. Johnny Prince in Namuro is third. Jason Short in turn 2 is second. Jason Short is up 15.47 in turn 7. Jason Short is up 15.52 in hump. Jason Short is up 15.80 in the kink. Jason Short improved is first with a 135.207. The race dictator is provisional pole with a 135.093. Johnny Prince is P3. Johnny Prince improved is third with a 135.392. 0.299 off pole. Johnny Prince is up 0.50 in Essies. The race dictator is P1. The race dictator is up 0.21 in turn 7. The race dictator is up 0.30 in hump. Moose Knuckle from Canada in turn 6 is P4 up 0.32. Johnny Prince in bridge turn is third up 0.15. The race dictator from New Zealand in Namuro is first. 5 minutes remaining in the session. The race dictator is provisional pole with a 134.844. The race dictator is up 0.05 in SEs. Moose knuckle in bridge turn is fourth up 0.22. Moose knuckle improved is fourth with a 137.116. 2.272 off pole. The race dictator in the gulch is P1 up 0.11. Moose knuckle is fourth up 0.13. Moose knuckle is up 0.53 in turn 10. Jason short in turn 8 is second up 0.11. Jason short is up 0.23 in the gulch. Jason short improved is P2 with a 134.955. 0.111 off pole. Moose knuckle from Canada in turn 8 is fourth up 0.15. Jason short in SEs is P2 up 0.15. Jason short is up 0.33 in turn 8. Jason short is up 0.38 in turn 10. Jason short is up 0.40 in Namuro. The qualifying session is now in overtime. Jason Short is provisional pole with a 134.583. Moose Knuckle in turn 8 is 4th up 0.63. Moose Knuckle is up 0.58 in the Gulch. Moose Knuckle improved is P4 with a 136.076. 1.493 off pole. The race session is at Mont Tremblant GT, no chicane, in Quebec, Canada. Jason Short from New Zealand is P1. The race dictator from New Zealand is P2. 20 minutes remaining in the session. Race start. Jason Short is P1. Moose Knuckle from Canada in turn 3 is second. Jason Short in turn 6 is fourth. Johnny Prince from New Zealand is P2. Jason Short is P4. Johnny Prince in Namuro is P2. The race dictator in turn 6 on lap 2 is first, 0.4 ahead of Johnny Prince. Johnny Prince is P2, 0.4 behind the race dictator. The race dictator in hump is P2 battling Johnny Prince. The race dictator passed Johnny Prince for P1. Johnny Prince from New Zealand is P2, 0.3 behind the race dictator. Moose Knuckle on lap 3 is third, 3.1 behind Johnny Prince. Johnny Prince in Essies is second. Best lap is a 1:35.929. 1.570 off the fastest lap. The race dictator on lap 3 is P1, 0.5 ahead of Johnny Prince. Johnny Prince is second, 0.6 behind the race dictator. Jason Short in Namuro is P4, 4.4 behind Moose Knuckle. Jason Short was 2.2 faster last lap. 15 minutes remaining in the session. Johnny Prince in Essies is second, 0.6 behind the race dictator. The race dictator in turn 8 is second. Johnny Prince in turn 10 is second. Best lap is a 1:35.311. 0.952 off the fastest lap. Johnny Prince passed the race dictator for first. Johnny Prince lost P1 to the race dictator. The race dictator in Namuro is second, 0.1 behind Johnny Prince. The race dictator lost P2 to Moose Knuckle. Moose Knuckle is second. Moose Knuckle lost second to the race dictator. Jason Short in Essies is fourth, 0.3 behind Moose Knuckle. Moose Knuckle in turn 6 on lap 5 is P4, 0.2 behind Jason Short. Jason Short was 0.9 faster last lap. Jason Short in turn 8 is P2, 0.1 ahead of the race dictator. The race dictator in hump is third, 0.3 behind Jason Short. Jason Short was 6.5 faster last lap. Moose Knuckle in bridge turn is fourth, 0.4 behind the race dictator. Jason Short in Namuro is second, 0.3 behind Johnny Prince. The race dictator in turn 2 on lap 6 is P3, 0.5 behind Jason Short. Jason Short in turn 6 is P2, 0.2 behind Johnny Prince. The race dictator is third, 0.4 behind Jason Short. Moose Knuckle is P4. Best lap is a 1:35.636. 1.277 off the fastest lap. Johnny Prince in the Gulch is second, 0.1 ahead of the race dictator. The race dictator was 3.3 faster last lap. Johnny Prince lost P3 to Moose Knuckle. Moose Knuckle in Namuro is third, 0.3 behind the race dictator. The race dictator was 3.0 faster last lap. Moose Knuckle lost third to Johnny Prince. 10 minutes remaining in the session. Johnny Prince is P3. Jason Short in turn 6 is first, 2.1 ahead of the race dictator. Jason Short lost P2 to Johnny Prince. Jason Short lost P3 to Moose Knuckle. The race dictator is P1. Johnny Prince in turn 8 is P2, 0.7 behind the race dictator. Moose Knuckle in turn 8 is third, 0.5 behind Johnny Prince. Johnny Prince in hump is P2. Jason Short in bridge turn is P3, 0.3 behind Johnny Prince. Johnny Prince in Namuro is P3, 0.1 behind Jason Short. Jason Short was 3.3 faster last lap. Johnny Prince lost third to Moose Knuckle. Jason Short from New Zealand in turn 2 is P2, 0.6 ahead of Moose Knuckle. Moose Knuckle is P3. Jason Short from New Zealand is second, 0.5 behind the race dictator. Moose Knuckle from Canada is third, 0.8 behind Jason Short. Jason Short in the Gulch is second, 0.3 behind the race dictator. Moose Knuckle is P3, 0.5 behind Jason Short. The race dictator in SEs is P1, 3.1 ahead of Jason Short. Moose Knuckle is P3, 1.1 behind Jason Short. Jason Short was 0.9 faster last lap. Jason Short in turn 8 is second, 1.0 behind the race dictator. Jason Short passed the race dictator for P1. Johnny Prince in the Gulch is P4, 1.8 behind Moose Knuckle. 5 minutes remaining in the session. Moose Knuckle in turn 2 is P3. Jason Short in turn 8 is P1, 2.8 ahead of the race dictator. Johnny Prince is 4th, 1.5 behind Moose Knuckle. Johnny Prince was 5.8 faster last lap. The race dictator in Namuro is P2, 3.9 ahead of Moose Knuckle. Johnny Prince in turn 1 is 4th, 1.1 behind Moose Knuckle. Jason Short in turn 8 is P1, 3.5 ahead of the race dictator. Johnny Prince in turn 8 on lap 11 is 4th, 0.5 behind Moose Knuckle. Moose Knuckle from Canada in the kink is P3, 0.5 ahead of Johnny Prince. Johnny Prince was 0.5 faster last lap. Johnny Prince on lap 11 is 4th, 0.4 behind Moose Knuckle. The race dictator from New Zealand is second. The race dictator lost third to Johnny Prince. Johnny Prince in turn 7 is third, 0.5 behind Moose Knuckle. Jason Short in bridge turn is first. Johnny Prince is third, 1.0 behind Moose Knuckle. Jason Short is P1. Johnny Prince is P3, 1.5 behind Moose Knuckle. The leader has just finished the race. Jason Short finished first. Moose Knuckle finished second. Johnny Prince finished third. The race dictator finished fourth. The race session is at Mont Tremblant GT, no chicane, in Quebec, Canada. The race dictator from New Zealand is first. Johnny Prince from New Zealand is P2. 20 minutes remaining in the session. Race start. The race dictator is P1. Moose Knuckle from Canada in turn 3 is P3. The race dictator in turn 6 is second. Jason Short from New Zealand is third. The race dictator in hump is second. Jason Short in the Gulch is third. The race dictator in Namuro is second. Jason Short in turn 1 is P3. Best lap is a 1:41.976. 1.465 off the fastest lap. The race dictator in Essies is third, 0.8 behind Jason Short. Moose Knuckle is P4. Best lap is a 1:47.005. 6.494 off the fastest lap. Jason Short is P2, 1.5 behind Johnny Prince. Moose Knuckle from Canada in the kink is fourth, 2.1 behind the race dictator. Jason Short in turn 1 is P2, 1.0 behind Johnny Prince. The race dictator is P3, 2.2 ahead of Moose Knuckle. Moose Knuckle was 4.0 faster last lap. Jason Short is second, 0.9 behind Johnny Prince. Johnny Prince in the kink is P1, 0.8 ahead of Jason Short. Jason Short is P2, 0.5 behind Johnny Prince. 15 minutes remaining in the session. Moose Knuckle from Canada in Essies is 4th, 3.6 behind the race dictator. Jason Short in turn 8 is 2nd, 0.8 behind Johnny Prince. Johnny Prince in the kink is 1st. Jason Short in Paddock Bend is P2, 0.3 behind Johnny Prince. Moose Knuckle in Essies is 4th, 4.2 behind the race dictator. Johnny Prince in turn 8 is 2nd, 0.1 behind Jason Short. Moose Knuckle is P4, 4.4 behind the race dictator. Jason Short in the kink is 1st, 1.8 ahead of Johnny Prince. The race dictator in Namuro is 3rd, 1.2 behind Johnny Prince. Moose Knuckle in Paddock Bend is 4th, 0.3 behind the race dictator. Johnny Prince in turn 3 is P2, 0.4 ahead of the race dictator. The race dictator in turn 6 is 3rd, 0.2 ahead of Moose Knuckle. Moose Knuckle is P4, 0.6 behind the race dictator. Moose Knuckle was 4.1 faster last lap. Johnny Prince in hump on lap 6 is P2, 0.6 behind Jason Short. The race dictator in bridge turn is 3rd, 1.0 behind Johnny Prince. Johnny Prince in Namuro is P2, 0.6 behind Jason Short. 10 minutes remaining in the session. The race dictator in turn 2 is third. Best lap is a 1:35.866. 1.439 off the fastest lap. Moose Knuckle from Canada is fourth, 0.5 behind the race dictator. The race dictator was 0.6 faster last lap. Johnny Prince from New Zealand is second, 0.7 behind Jason Short. Moose Knuckle is fourth. Best lap is a 1:35.883. 1.456 off the fastest lap. Johnny Prince in the Gulch is P2, 0.4 behind Jason Short. Moose Knuckle in the Kink is fourth, 1.2 behind the race dictator. Johnny Prince from New Zealand in turn 1 is P2, 1.2 behind Jason Short. Moose Knuckle in Essies is fourth, 1.3 behind the race dictator. Johnny Prince in turn 7 is second. Best lap is a 1:34.849. 0.422 off the fastest lap. Johnny Prince lost P2 to the race dictator. The race dictator is P2, 3.1 behind Jason Short. Jason Short was 1.2 faster last lap. Moose Knuckle in turn 10 is P3, 0.6 behind the race dictator. Johnny Prince in bridge turn is P4, 0.5 behind Moose Knuckle. The race dictator in Namuro on lap 8 is second, 0.3 behind Jason Short. Johnny Prince in turn 1 is third, 0.3 ahead of Moose Knuckle. Moose Knuckle in Essies is P4, 0.2 behind Johnny Prince. Moose Knuckle passed Johnny Prince for third. The race dictator in turn 7 is P2, 0.7 behind Jason Short. Jason Short in the Gulch on lap 9 is first, 0.3 ahead of the race dictator. 5 minutes remaining in the session. The race dictator in Namuro is P2, 0.5 behind Jason Short. Moose Knuckle in Essies is P3, 2.5 behind the race dictator. The race dictator is P2, 0.4 behind Jason Short. Jason Short in the Gulch is P1, 0.3 ahead of the race dictator. The race dictator was 0.5 faster last lap. The race dictator in Namuro on lap 10 is second, 0.2 behind Jason Short. Johnny Prince in turn 3 is P4, 4.6 behind Moose Knuckle. Johnny Prince was 1.7 faster last lap. Jason Short in turn 7 is second, 0.1 behind the race dictator. Jason Short passed the race dictator for P1. The race dictator is P2. Johnny Prince from New Zealand in Hump is fourth, 0.6 behind Moose Knuckle. Johnny Prince passed Moose Knuckle for third. The race dictator is P2, 0.9 behind Jason Short. Moose Knuckle in Namuro is P4, 0.5 behind Johnny Prince. Johnny Prince in turn 2 is third. Best lap is a 1:34.682. 0.255 off the fastest lap. Moose Knuckle from Canada in Essies is fourth, 0.7 behind Johnny Prince. Johnny Prince is P3, 0.5 behind the race dictator. Moose Knuckle in turn 10 is fourth, 1.5 behind Johnny Prince. Johnny Prince in the kink is P3, 0.3 behind the race dictator. Jason Short from New Zealand is first. Johnny Prince in turn 7 is third, 0.2 behind the race dictator. Moose Knuckle in hump is P4, 4.4 behind Johnny Prince. The leader has just finished the race. Jason Short finished first. The race dictator finished second. Johnny Prince finished P3. Moose Knuckle finished P4.